On a radiant Saturday afternoon in September, 38-year-old nurse Claudia Reimann stood in a white dress before the altar of Stuttgart Street, Peter's church, and married a man she had known for only 3 months. 48 hours later, she was found dead in her own apartment, and her newlywed husband had vanished without a trace. The woman who had dedicated her life to caring for and healing others became the victim of a manipulation so coldly calculated that even experienced investigators were left stunned. Claudia Reimann was what her colleagues at the Stuttgart Rehabilitation Clinic lovingly called the soul of the ward. With her gentle manner and unwavering sense of duty, she had earned a reputation as an exceptional caregiver over her 15 years in the profession. Patients confided their deepest fears to her, colleagues sought her advice in difficult situations, and the clinic administration valued her reliability. But behind this strong facade was a woman suffering from a deep emotional wound. 2 years ago, her 10-year marriage had failed. Her ex-husband had left her for a younger woman, making her feel unlovable, not attractive enough, not interesting enough. The divorce had not only broken her heart but also destroyed her self-confidence. Since then, she had lived alone in her 2-room apartment in Stuttgart-Dagerloch, surrounded by the silence that reminded her of her loneliness. Darnell Carter initially seemed like a gift from heaven. The 42-year-old man with Nigerian roots, weighing 235 kilograms, was far from the classic ideal of male attractiveness, but he possessed a charisma that immediately captivated Claudia. His deep, velvety voice, his warm laugh, his way of looking at her as if she were the most precious thing in the world, all of this made her heart beat faster. What Claudia didn't know, Darnell Carter was a master of manipulation, a man who studied women like her, recognized their weaknesses, and exploited them with surgical precision. He had already made life hell for 3 women, had accumulated 5-figure debts, and was desperately searching for his next victim. When he first saw Claudia in a cafe near the clinic, he immediately recognized what she was: a lonely, wounded woman with a stable income and a big heart. The story of their relationship was a textbook case of psychological manipulation. In just 3 months, Darnell managed to turn Claudia's entire life upside down, isolate her from her friends, gain her trust, and convince her that she couldn't live without him. He perfectly played the role of the caring, vulnerable man who was stigmatized by his body weight and had finally found a woman who loved him for who he was inside. Claudia saw in him not the manipulative perpetrator, but the wounded man who needed her care. She saw her chance to be loved again, to be needed again, to feel important to someone again. This longing became her trap, and Darnell Carter exploited it with a ruthlessness that makes the blood freeze in one's veins. What happened in the 48 hours after their wedding reveals the terrifying reality of domestic violence and shows how quickly love can turn into deadly terror. June 7th had been an ordinary Tuesday until Claudia Reimann finished her shift at the rehabilitation clinic at 3:30 and decided not to go straight home. Instead, she sat in the small cafe Zeitlos on Königstrasse, ordered a cappuccino, and opened the book she had been trying to read for weeks. She loved these quiet moments after work, this small break between her patient's needs and the emptiness of her apartment. She didn't notice him at first. Darnell Carter sat at a table in the back corner of the cafe and had already been watching her for 20 minutes. As an experienced manipulator, he had learned to recognize potential victims. The way Claudia sat alone, how she occasionally sighed, how she mechanically stirred her coffee without drinking, all of this revealed her loneliness to him. Her well-groomed appearance, the discreet designer clothes, the expensive handbag revealed her financial stability, and her profession, which he recognized from the small pin on her blouse, revealed her caring nature. When Claudia stood up to go to the counter and order a second drink, Darnell staged the coincidence. He rose from his table, which was a laborious process due to his body weight, and also went to the counter. In doing so, he seemingly accidentally dropped his wallet, right next to Claudia's feet. "Oh, that belongs to you," said Claudia, and bent down to pick up the wallet. When she handed it to him, their fingers briefly touched, and Darnell gave her a smile that struck her to the core. "How clumsy of me," he said with a voice that sounded warm and slightly embarrassed. "Thank you very much. You're very kind." His accent was an interesting mixture of American English and German influences, which gave him an exotic touch. "You're welcome," Claudia replied, and felt herself blushing. It was the first time in months that a man had spoken to her so directly. "May I ask what makes you so thoughtful?" asked Darnell, pointing to the book in her hand. "You look like you have heavy thoughts." Claudia hesitated. Normally, she didn't talk to strangers about personal things, but something in his eyes, a mixture of interest and understanding, encouraged her. "Just a stressful day at work," she said. "I'm a nurse, and sometimes it's hard not to take other people's suffering home with you." Darnell's eyes lit up. A nurse, perfect, caring, compassionate, used to taking care of others. "I can understand that," he said. "I admire people like you. It takes special strength to help others when they're most vulnerable." The next 30 minutes flew by. Darnell told her about his supposed company, a delivery service he had built up. He spoke of the challenges of living as a large man in a society that valued beauty ideals above all else. He told her about his mother, who lived in Nigeria and to whom he sent money every month. He painted the picture of a successful but lonely man who, despite his success, suffered from prejudice. "People only see my size," he said with a sadness in his voice that seemed fake, but deeply touched Claudia. "They don't see the man behind it, who desires nothing more than to find a woman who loves him for who he really island." Claudia felt something contract in her chest. These words could have come from her too. She also longed to be loved for who she really was, not for her appearance, not for her youth, but for her heart. When they said goodbye, Darnell asked for her phone number. "I would like to see you again," he said. "If you feel like having a real conversation with someone who understands what it's like to feel lonely." Claudia gave him her number, and as she went home, she felt something like hope for the first time since her divorce. She had no idea that she had just taken the first step into a carefully planned trap. If you've ever wondered how quickly loneliness can turn into deadly danger, then subscribe to this channel, because the stories we tell here could save your life. Darnell Carter waited exactly 24 hours before calling Claudia. This calculated pause was part of his strategy, long enough to make her think, short enough not to let her interest cool. When her phone rang on Wednesday evening and she saw his name on the display, she felt her heart beat faster. "Claudia?" said his warm voice. "I hope I'm not disturbing you. I couldn't stop thinking about our conversation yesterday." She smiled, even though he couldn't see her. "You're not disturbing me. I've been thinking about it too." "Would you like to have dinner?" he asked. "I know a wonderful restaurant, very quiet, very cozy. We could really talk without the hustle and bustle of a cafe." The restaurant Darnell had chosen was perfect for his purposes. La Dolce Vita was a small Italian place in a side street, discreet and romantic. The dim lighting, the red candles on every table, the soft music in the background, everything created an atmosphere of intimacy. Darnell was punctual and had dressed elegantly. Despite his body weight, he appeared well-groomed and self-confident. He greeted Claudia with a hand kiss, an old-fashioned gesture that she found charming. During dinner, Darnell unfolded his manipulation tactic with the precision of a surgeon. He listened attentively, asked the right questions at the right time, and mirrored her emotions. When Claudia told him about her failed marriage, he showed exactly the right amount of outrage and compassion. "How could he let a woman like you go?" he said and took her hand. "You're intelligent, beautiful, compassionate. Any man would be lucky to have a woman like you by his side." These words struck Claudia's heart. For 2 years, she had been waiting for someone to see her this way, to value her this way. The touch of his large, warm hand on hers sent shivers up her arm. Then Darnell played his trump card. He told his invented life story with a conviction that revealed years of practice. His father, a diplomat, had died early. His mother had raised him alone, in poverty, but with much love. He had worked his way up, built his delivery service, but success felt empty without someone to share it with. "Do you know what's worst about being alone?" he asked, looking deep into her eyes. "Not the silence, not the empty bed. It's the feeling that there's no one there who's really happy when you come home." Claudia nodded. She knew exactly what he was talking about. "But today," Darnell continued, "today I'm looking forward to going home, for the first time in years. Because I know I can write to you. Because I know there's someone who might be thinking of me too." When he brought her home, he kissed her in front of her door. It was a gentle, respectful kiss that had exactly the right mixture of passion and restraint. Claudia felt her knees go weak. "May I call you again tomorrow?" he asked. "Yes," she whispered. "Please." In the following weeks, Claudia was overwhelmed by Darnell's attention. He called her every day, sent her flowers to the ward, surprised her with small gifts. But most important were his words. He told her daily that he loved her, that he couldn't live without her, that she was the best thing that had ever happened to him. Claudia blossomed under this attention. Her colleagues noticed how she glowed, how she hummed while working. After 2 years of loneliness, she felt alive again, valuable again, loved again. But Darnell's strategy had another dimension. Slowly, subtly, he began to isolate her from her social environment. When she mentioned that she wanted to meet with her friend Miriam Schultz, he reacted hurt. "Of course you can meet with her," he would say with a voice that suggested pain. "I understand. You need time for yourself. I'll sit here alone and wait." Claudia began canceling appointments with friends. She didn't want to hurt Darnell, didn't want him to feel rejected. After all, he loved her so much. Wasn't it understandable that he wanted to spend every minute with her? The psychological manipulation worked perfectly. Without realizing it, Claudia became emotionally dependent on Darnell. He became her center, her only source of validation and love. And that's exactly where he wanted her, isolated, dependent, and ready for the next step of his diabolical plan. Miriam Schultz had known Claudia since their training. The 39-year-old bank clerk had seen many men come and go in Claudia's life, but she had never seen her friend so changed. When she met Claudia for coffee a month after her first date with Darnell, she was shocked by what she saw. "You look tired," said Miriam, studying Claudia's face. Indeed, her eyes appeared sunken, and she had lost weight. "Tired? No, I'm happy," Claudia replied, but her voice sounded mechanical. "Darnell and I spend a lot of time together. He needs me, you understand?" Miriam frowned. "Needs you? Claudia, you've only known each other for a month. You don't understand," Claudia said with a sharpness in her voice that Miriam had never heard before. "He's different from other men. He's been through so much, and I'm the first woman who really sees him." Over the following weeks, Miriam watched with growing concern as her friend changed. Claudia regularly canceled planned meetings, always with the same justification: Darnell needed her. When Miriam suggested she could meet Darnell, Claudia became strangely evasive. "He's very sensitive," she said. "He's afraid that my friends will judge him because of his weight. I don't want to pressure him." The truth was different. Darnell had systematically convinced Claudia that her friends didn't understand her, that they were jealous of her happiness, that they wanted to sabotage her relationship. "Did you notice how Miriam reacted when you told her about me?" he had asked after her first mention of her friend. "She didn't seem happy for you. Real friends are happy when you find love." These subtle comments accumulated in Claudia's consciousness like poison. Slowly, she began to question her friends' motives. Were they really happy for her, or were they just jealous? The first major red flag appeared in the 5th week of their relationship. Claudia was working a late shift when Darnell appeared unannounced at the clinic. The head nurse was surprised to see such a large man in the corridors and asked him about the reason for his visit. "I'm here for Claudia Reimann," he said with an authority in his voice that made the nurse pause. "I'm her partner." When Claudia was called and saw Darnell, she was surprised but also flattered. No one had ever visited her at work. "I wanted to surprise you," he said, and hugged her in front of her colleagues. "I couldn't wait any longer." But Dr. Weber, the head physician of the ward, observed the scene with professional interest. Something about Darnell's behavior irritated him. The way he touched Claudia, possessively, controlling. The way he looked at the other staff members, scrutinizing, almost hostile. "Claudia," Dr. Weber said later in private, "is everything okay? Your boyfriend seemed very intense." Claudia immediately felt attacked. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Just that he seemed very possessive. I'm worried about you." "That's ridiculous," Claudia replied, but doubt gnawed at her. Was Darnell really possessive, or were her colleagues just not used to a man who openly showed his feelings? Darnell immediately sensed that something was wrong when he picked her up. "What did that doctor say to you?" he asked in the car. Claudia hesitated. He was just concerned. Darnell's face darkened. "Concerned? About what?" "He said you seemed possessive." The explosion came without warning. Darnell hit the steering wheel with his fist so hard that the horn sounded. "Possessive? Because I love the woman I want to marry?" Claudia was startled by the vehemence of his reaction. "Marry?" Suddenly, Darnell's anger was gone, replaced by tender vulnerability. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I wanted to make it more romantic. But yes, Claudia, I want to marry you. You're the best thing that ever happened to me." The sudden turn from anger to tenderness completely confused Claudia. She didn't know this was a classic manipulation technique, switching between extreme emotional states to throw the victim off balance. "I don't know what to say," she stammered. "Say yes," whispered Darnell and took her hand. "Say yes, and we can be happy forever. Let's not wait, Claudia. Life is too short. We're not young anymore. Why should we waste time?" That night, Claudia lay awake thinking about his words. Marriage, after only 6 weeks. Was that crazy or romantic? Was it love or madness? She didn't know. But the loneliness of the past 2 years, the longing for love and security, the fear of being alone again, all of that outweighed her doubts. The next morning she called Darnell. "Yes," she said. "My answer is yes." She heard him crying with happiness on the other end of the line. What she couldn't hear was the cold smile in his voice when he hung up. News of Claudia's engagement spread like wildfire through the rehabilitation clinic. Her colleagues were shocked, not only by the fact that she had gotten engaged, but by the speed with which everything was happening. 6 weeks? Asked Nurse Angela, stunned. "Claudia, do you really know him?" But Claudia radiated with an intensity that seemed to outshine her doubts. "When it's right, she said with the conviction of a woman trying to convince herself. "Why wait? We're both old enough to know what we want." Darnell had orchestrated the engagement with an efficiency that resembled a military operation. The day after her agreement, he surprised her with a diamond ring that, as he claimed, had cost 2,000 euros. In reality, it was a cheap zirconia ring from an online shop, but Claudia was too overwhelmed to ask questions. "It's beautiful," she whispered, admiring the sparkling stone on her finger. "Not as beautiful as you," Darnell replied and kissed her. "But Claudia, I need to talk to you about something." She looked at him expectantly. "My company is going through a difficult phase right now," he said with a facial expression that mixed worry and shame. "A big client dropped out, and I need to react quickly. I need a loan, just temporarily, until the situation stabilizes." Claudia's stomach contracted. "A loan? 5,000 euros? Darnell said quickly. "I know it's a lot, but as my fiancé, we're a team now, aren't we? What's mine is yours, and what's yours?" The question hung in the air, but the implication was clear. Claudia felt cornered. She loved him. She was engaged to him. Wasn't it normal to help him in financial difficulties? I would have to touch my savings," she said hesitantly. Darnell's face darkened for a moment. Then he smiled again. "Of course. I shouldn't ask. You don't know me well enough yet to trust me." The emotional blackmail worked perfectly. Claudia felt bad for hesitating. "No, that's not it. Of course I trust you. We're engaged." The next day, she transferred 5,000 euros to him. Miriam Schultz was horrified when Claudia told her the news. They met in the same cafe where Claudia had met Darnell, an irony that neither of them noticed. "Claudia, this is madness," said Miriam, staring at the ring. "You've known this man for 2 months, and now you're giving him your savings?" "It's a loan," Claudia corrected stiffly, "and we're getting married in 2 weeks." "In 2 weeks?" Miriam's voice almost cracked. "Claudia, listen to yourself. This doesn't sound like you. This sounds like someone under pressure." "No one's pressuring me," Claudia replied, but her voice trembled slightly. "Darnell loves me. He doesn't want to wait because he's afraid of losing me." "And why would he lose you?" Claudia stared into her coffee. "Because I'm not perfect. Because I'm not the youngest anymore. Because..." Her voice broke. Miriam reached across the table and took her hand. "Claudia, look at me. You're a wonderful woman. You deserve a man who loves you for who you are, not because he needs your savings." "You don't understand," Claudia said and pulled her hand away. "You've never been truly alone. You don't know what it's like to think you'll never find anyone again. But that doesn't mean you have to marry the first man who pays attention to you." Claudia's eyes flashed. "The first man? Darnell isn't just anyone. He's sensitive. He's loving. He needs me." "He needs you? Or does he need your money?" The words hit like a slap. Claudia stood up abruptly. "I think this conversation is over." "Claudia, wait." But Claudia had already rushed out the door. Standing outside on the street, her hands were shaking as she dialed Darnell's number. "Darling, what's wrong?" he asked in the warm voice she loved. "Miriam," she sobbed. "She doesn't understand us. She thinks you're using me." "Oh, my darling," Darnell said with perfectly measured compassion. "I'm so sorry. I was afraid something like this would happen. People are jealous of real love. They don't understand what we have. But what if she's right? Claudia whispered. Then I would understand that, Darnell replied calmly. Then I would step back and leave you to your friends. Is that what you want? The thought of losing Darnell filled Claudia with panic. No, I don't want that. I love you. And I love you, he said. More than my life. That's why it hurts so much when people who don't know you can't see how happy we are. When Claudia got home, she blocked Miriam's number. It was a symbolic act. The final step of her isolation was complete. September 13th was a perfect late summer day in Stuttgart Street. Peter's church was decorated with white roses and lilies, and the few guests, mainly Claudia's work colleagues, as Darnell claimed his family couldn't travel from Nigeria, waited for the bridal couple. Pastor Lehman had experienced many weddings in his 38 years as a clergyman, but this one made him uncomfortable. When he first met the couple for marriage preparation, several things had struck him. Claudia seemed nervous, almost anxious, while Darnell exercised unnatural control over the situation. He spoke for her, answered questions directed at her, and constantly touched her, not lovingly, but possessively. Are you sure you're ready for this step? Pastor Lehman had asked Claudia privately. Of course I'm ready, she had answered, but her hands had trembled, and she hadn't been able to look him in the eyes. Now, standing before the altar in her cream-colored dress that her mother had given her for the wedding, Claudia looked like a woman being led to the scaffold. Her hands trembled so badly she could barely hold the bouquet. Darnell, on the other hand, beamed with satisfaction. He had bought a tailored suit, at Claudia's expense, that emphasized his imposing figure. To all present, he looked like a man experiencing the happiest day of his life. Do you love this man? Asked Pastor Lehman when the moment came. Claudia hesitated. 1 second too long, but long enough for the pastor to notice. Yes, she finally whispered. Then I pronounce you husband and wife. The kiss was violent, too violent for the occasion. Darnell pulled Claudia to him as if he wanted to devour her, and the guests applauded politely but without real joy. The wedding reception took place in a small restaurant. Darnell had insisted on keeping costs low since they needed the money for their future together. Claudia's colleagues tried to be cheerful, but the atmosphere was strangely subdued. Dr. Weber pulled Claudia aside during dinner. Claudia, I have to tell you something. We've been worried about you. You've seemed different in recent weeks. Different? More anxious. Thinner. You're not sleeping well. We can see it. And your husband. He hesitated. What about my husband? He calls the ward constantly. He asks about your work schedule. Wants to know when you're coming home. That's not normal, Claudia. Claudia's face became rigid. He loves me. He worries about me. Love and control are two different things. Before Claudia could answer, Darnell appeared beside them. Is there a problem? He asked with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. No, Dr. Weber said calmly. I was just congratulating Claudia. That's very kind of you, Darnell replied. But I think my wife would like to return to her guests now. The way he emphasized my wife made Dr. Weber shudder. They spent their wedding night in Claudia's apartment. Darnell had suggested they should initially live at her place since his apartment was too small for 2 people. In truth, there was no other apartment. He had been sleeping on a friend's couch. Finally, said Darnell as he closed the door behind him, finally you belong to me. The words were meant to sound romantic, but Claudia sensed something threatening in them. I belong to myself, she said with a weak smile. Darnell's face darkened. That was before today. Now we're married. Husband and wife. What's mine is yours, and what's yours is mine. That night, Darnell's mask began to fall completely. The first night as a married couple became Claudia's first true insight into Darnell's true personality. What should have begun as a romantic wedding night transformed into a nightmare of control and violence. Where are your bank statements? Darnell asked before they had even changed clothes. My bank statements? Claudia was confused. Why? We're married, he said as if that were an explanation. I need to know what we have so I can plan our finances. Claudia hesitated. Her savings had been her only safety net in the 2 years since the divorce. Darnell, can we talk about this tomorrow? It's our wedding night. His facial expression changed so quickly that Claudia flinched. The warm, loving mask disappeared and revealed something cold, calculating underneath. Tomorrow? He repeated with a voice trembling with suppressed rage. My wife doesn't want to discuss our joint finances with me? That's not it, Claudia stammered. I just thought you could keep secrets from me, he interrupted. You thought you could continue playing a single woman who owes no one any accountability. The sudden shift in his personality frightened Claudia deeply. This wasn't the man who had courted her for the past 3 months. This was a stranger. "Darnell, what's wrong with you?" He stepped closer to her, and his imposing figure suddenly seemed threatening. "What's wrong with me? I married a woman who doesn't trust me, who thinks she can run her marriage by her own rules." Claudia felt her heart racing. "I trust you, but my savings, that's all I have." "All we have," he corrected sharply. "There is no I anymore, Claudia. There's only us now." With trembling hands, she got her bank documents from the desk. When Darnell looked through the account statements, he whistled softly through his teeth. 28,000 euros, he murmured. "That's more than I expected. Those are my savings from 15 years, Claudia said quietly. "Our savings," he corrected again. "And we'll invest them well." "Invest?" Darnell turned to her, and the charming smile was back, but it didn't reach his eyes. "My company, darling. With this money I can expand, close new contracts. We'll be rich." Claudia felt as if the ground was being pulled out from under her feet. "Darnell, that's my entire life savings. If something goes wrong." "Nothing will go wrong," he said, and his voice became harder again. "Unless you don't trust me, unless you think I'm a fraud." The emotional blackmail worked as always. Claudia felt guilty for having doubts. "Of course I trust you. Then you'll transfer the money to my business account first thing tomorrow morning." The next morning brought new horrors. Claudia woke up to find Darnell going through her personal things, her letters, her diary, her private photos. "What are you doing?" she asked, horrified. "I'm getting to know my wife," he answered without looking up. "A marriage shouldn't have secrets. Those are private things." Darnell held up a photo, a picture of her with a colleague at a Christmas party. "Who is this?" "That's Dr. Mueller from cardiology. We just work together." "Just work together?" Darnell's voice became dangerously quiet. "You look very happy in this photo. Very familiar." "Darnell, that's ridiculous. It was a company party." He tore the photo in front of her eyes. "Married women don't keep photos like this." The pattern continued all day. Darnell asked questions about every man in her life, colleagues, doctors, even the mailman. He wanted names, details, the nature of her relationship with them. "You talk too much with other men," he said in the evening. "That's not appropriate for a married woman." "It's my job," Claudia protested. "I have to talk to doctors and patients." "With patients, yes. With doctors, only what's necessary." When Claudia wanted to go to work the next day, Darnell blocked her way. "Where are you going?" "To work. I have an early shift. I think you should quit." Claudia stared at him. "What?" "You heard me. A married woman should take care of her husband, not spend all day with other men." "Darnell, that's my profession. That's my life." His face became dark. "I am your life now." The drive to the clinic was the first time since their wedding that Claudia spent alone. Sitting in her car, she began to tremble. What had happened to the loving, caring man she had married? Had this always been there? Under the surface? On the ward, Nurse Angela immediately noticed something was wrong. "Claudia, are you okay? You look pale." "Just tired," Claudia lied, but during her shift, her phone rang every 30 minutes. Each time it was Darnell. "Where are you? Who are you talking to? When are you coming home? Why is it taking so long?" The other nurses began exchanging worried glances. So many calls weren't normal. At the end of her shift, Darnell was already waiting in the parking lot. His face was a mask of feigned concern and real anger. "You took too long," he said, as she got into the car. "I had a normal shift. 4 hours and 12 minutes for a normal shift? Who were you talking to?" The fact that he was keeping exact track of her time filled Claudia with cold fear. "No one in particular, just work." "Dr. Weber called you into his office." "I saw it." Claudia realized he had been watching her. "How do you know that?" "I look after my wife," he replied. "What did he want?" "Just routine things, patient files." Darnell's hand closed around her wrist so tightly she cried out, "Don't lie to me." "I'm not lying. He asked you if everything was okay at home, right?" The realization that he must have overheard their conversation filled Claudia with panic. "How can you know that?" "I know everything," Darnell said coldly. "I'm your husband. It's my right and duty to protect you." That night, Claudia lay awake beside the snoring Darnell and realized with crystal clear clarity that she had made a terrible mistake. The man beside her wasn't the loving partner she thought she had married. He was a control freak, possibly dangerous. But when she thought about leaving him, she was overcome with pure panic. She had lost her friends, her savings would soon be gone, and she was completely isolated. Where would she go? Who would help her? The trap had closed completely. On the second day of her marriage, Claudia woke up with bruises on her wrists. When she asked Darnell about it, he looked at her with feigned innocence. "Bruises? I was just holding you when you were hysterical." "I wasn't hysterical. You were very upset. Sometimes I don't know how hard I'm gripping. You're so fragile." The way he said the word fragile sounded more like a threat than a tender observation. That day, at Darnell's urging, Claudia transferred 15,000 euros to his business account. She kept the rest for now, but only because she lied and claimed more money was in a fixed deposit that she couldn't withdraw early. "You're lying to me again," Darnell said with dangerously calm voice. "I'm not lying. The money is there. I just can't access it immediately." He studied her face with the intensity of a predator assessing its prey. "You have 1 week to get the rest." "1 week? Darnell, that's not how fixed deposits work." His hand shot out and grabbed her chin. "1 week," he repeated. The next few days developed into a nightmare of control and psychological terror. Darnell monitored every aspect of Claudia's life. He went to work with her, picked her up, accompanied her shopping. When she went to the bathroom, he waited outside the door. "I can't breathe," Claudia said to him on the third day. "That's love," he replied. "Real love means never wanting to be separated." But Claudia's colleagues noticed the change. Dr. Weber spoke to her again, this time more urgently. "Claudia, I'm seriously worried. You seem frightened, and your husband, he's behaving very strangely." "Strange how?" "He sits in his car in the parking lot all day watching the building. That's not normal." Claudia knew he was right, but speaking the truth would have meant admitting that her life had become a prison. "He's just worried about me." "Claudia," Dr. Weber placed his hand on her shoulder. "If you need help, there are people who can help you. You don't have to be alone." For a moment, Claudia was tempted to tell everything. The control, the threats, the growing violence. But then she thought of Darnell's words. "If you leave me, you'll never have peace again." On the fourth day, the situation escalated further. Claudia came home to find Darnell clearing all her clothes from the closet. "What are you doing?" "I'm sorting out," he said without looking up. "These things are too sexy. Married women don't dress like this." He held up a simple blue dress, one of her favorite pieces. "This one, for example, much too tight, shows too much of your figure. That's a completely normal dress, not for my wife." He threw the dress into a large garbage bag, along with half her wardrobe. Claudia watched as years of her personal choices and style went into plastic bags. "You can't just throw away my things." Darnell's hand struck her face so quickly she didn't see it coming. The blow wasn't particularly hard, but the shock was overwhelming. For the first time in her life, a man had hit her. "Never speak to me like that again," he said calmly, as if nothing had happened. "I'm your husband. I decide what's appropriate." Claudia held her cheek and stared at him. "You hit me. I corrected you," Darnell said. "And if you continue to be so disrespectful, I'll do it again." That night, Claudia didn't sleep. She lay next to the man who had hit her and thought about her options. She could leave, but where to? Her best friend Miriam wasn't speaking to her anymore. Her colleagues would ask questions, but could they really help her? And what if Darnell found her? Fear paralyzed her. But even more paralyzing was the shame. How could she, an educated, intelligent woman, have gotten into this situation? How could she have been so deceived? On the 5th day of her marriage, Darnell made his next demand. "I want you to quit," he said at breakfast. "I already explained that to you. I can't quit. That's my profession. Your profession is being my wife. I need the work. We need the money." Darnell smiled coldly. "We have your savings. That's enough for now." "My savings aren't infinite. Then we'll find a way to get more." The way he said it made Claudia shudder. "What do you mean by that? You have credit cards, don't you? A house inherited from your parents? There are always ways to get money." The realization hit Claudia like a blow. He hadn't married her for love. He had married her to get her money. Everything else, the romance, the tenderness, the promises, had been a lie. "You only married me for my money," she whispered. Darnell's mask fell completely. The warm smile disappeared, replaced by an expression of cold calculation. "Of course," he said. "What did you think? That a man like me would marry an old, desperate woman like you for love?" The words hit deeper than any physical blow. Claudia felt something break inside her, not just her heart, but also her last illusion about herself and her situation. "You're a monster," she whispered. Darnell stood up, his massive figure casting a shadow over her. "I'm your husband," he said, "and you'll do what I say, or you'll face the consequences." What consequences? His smile was the coldest thing she had ever seen. "You don't want to find out." The 6th day of her marriage would be Claudia's last, though she didn't know it when she woke up that morning. The night had been plagued by nightmares, and she felt like a prisoner in her own home. Darnell was in a strangely good mood. He even whistled while getting dressed, an eerie contrast to his brutality of recent days. "You look tired," he observed, watching her in the mirror. "I slept badly. That will change soon," he said with a smile she couldn't interpret. "What do you mean? You'll soon have all the time in the world to sleep." The cryptic remark sent a chill down Claudia's spine, but before she could ask, the phone rang. It was the clinic. They were calling to ask why she hadn't come to work. "I have the day off," Claudia lied, looking over at Darnell, who nodded. "But you're on the schedule," said the voice on the other end. "There must be a mistake. I'll come tomorrow." When she hung up, Darnell looked at her with satisfaction. "Good. You're learning." All day, Darnell behaved strangely. He was alternately tender and threatening, as if playing a game whose rules only he knew. He even cooked for her, a gesture that should have been touching but only increased her fear. "This is delicious," she said, trying to smile. "My mother taught me this recipe," he replied. "She always said the way to a woman's heart is through her stomach." "You never told me much about your mother." Darnell's face darkened. "She's dead. Has been for a long time." Claudia realized she had touched a sore spot. "I'm sorry. She died because she was weak," Darnell said with a coldness in his voice that made Claudia shiver. "She let men use her. She never learned to fight back. That's a terrible way to talk about your mother." Darnell looked at her sharply. "You understand nothing about my family. You understand nothing about what I've been through." In the afternoon, Darnell began talking about their future together, but his vision sounded more like a threat than a plan. "We won't be able to stay here," he said suddenly. "Here? In my apartment? In Germany? Too many people are asking questions. Your colleagues, the neighbors. They don't understand our love." Claudia felt her stomach contract. "What do you suggest?" "We go to Nigeria. There I have family who will understand us." "Nigeria?" Claudia's voice almost cracked. "Darnell, I can't go to Nigeria. My life is here. My work. Your what?" he interrupted sharply. "Your friends? You don't have friends anymore. Your family? They've forgotten you. You have nothing left except me." The brutal truth of his words hit her like a blow. In the few months since she'd met him, she really had lost everything else. "I can't leave Germany," she whispered. "You'll do what I say," Darnell replied, his voice becoming threatening. "You're my wife. You belong to me. I belong to no one." The outburst surprised even her. For the first time in days, she had dared to contradict him. Darnell's reaction was explosive. He jumped up, his chair crashed to the floor, and within seconds he was beside her. His massive hand encircled her throat. "Never say that again," he hissed. "Never again." Claudia couldn't breathe. She clawed her fingers into his hand, but he was too strong. Black spots danced before her eyes. Then he suddenly let her go. She fell gasping to the floor, struggling for air. "That was a warning," Darnell said calmly. "Next time I won't be so lenient." That evening, while Darnell was showering, Claudia managed to secretly use her phone. With trembling fingers, she dialed Miriam's number. It rang and rang, but no one answered. She had blocked her number. Desperately, she called the clinic. Dr. Weber was still there. "Claudia, where were you today?" "We were worried." "Dr. Weber," she whispered, listening to the sound of the shower. "I need help." "What's wrong? You sound frightened." "My husband, the word stuck in her throat. "Claudia, are you in danger?" Before she could answer, she heard the water stop running. Darnell would come out of the bathroom any moment. "I can't talk anymore," she whispered hastily. "But if something happens to me..." "Claudia!" She hung up just as Darnell came out of the bathroom. His gaze immediately fell on the phone in her hand. "Who were you calling?" "No one. I was just checking the time." Darnell's eyes narrowed. He went to the phone and pressed redial. Dr. Weber's number appeared on the display. "You called your work colleague," he said with icy calm. "What did you tell him?" "Nothing, I wanted to ask if I had to work tomorrow." Darnell grabbed her arm and pulled her up to him. "Don't lie to me. I heard what you said. If something happens to me, what was that supposed to mean?" Claudia's heart was racing. I don't know what you're talking about. Do you think I'm stupid? His hand closed tighter around her arm. Do you think you can turn others against me? No, I didn't want to. But Darnell's anger was beyond control. For the first time, Claudia saw pure murderous intent in his eyes. You've ruined everything, he said with a voice trembling with hatred. We could have been happy, but you had to ruin everything. Darnell, please. You're just like my mother, he spat. Weak, treacherous, a disappointment. In that moment, Claudia knew she was going to die. What happened in the next hours was later reconstructed by Detective Inspector Heike Brandt from forensic evidence, timelines, and Darnell's own contradictory statements. The 46-year-old investigator had worked many cases of domestic violence in her 20-year career with Stuttgart Criminal Police, but the cold-bloodedness of this murder would haunt her for a long time. Darnell Carter didn't kill Claudia in a fit of rage. He killed her with the same calculating calm with which he had manipulated her for months. After catching her on the phone, he locked her in the bedroom. Claudia pounded on the door, screamed for help, but the walls of the old building were thick, and it was already past 10 o'clock. The neighbors were asleep. Darnell sat in the kitchen and considered his options. He couldn't let her go. She would go to the police, and his carefully constructed new identity would collapse. He couldn't take her with him. She would continue to resist. There was only one solution. At midnight, he opened the bedroom door. Claudia sat in the corner, huddled like a frightened animal. Are you ready to be reasonable? He asked calmly. Claudia nodded silently. She had no more tears. Good, then we'll pack. We're leaving Germany tonight. Tonight? Claudia's voice was barely a whisper. I booked flight tickets. We fly to Lagos at 6 in the morning. The lie came as easily to him as all the others. There were no flight tickets. There was no plan to flee. There was only the plan to silence her. I can't, Claudia said. I don't have a passport, no. Your passport is in the kitchen. I already got it. Indeed, he had found her passport, but only to destroy all identity documents later. Pack only the essentials, he ordered. We'll buy everything else new in Nigeria. Claudia began mechanically putting clothes into a suitcase. Her movements were robotic, as if she were being remote controlled. The shock and fear had put her into a state of dissociation. Darnell watched her and planned every step. He had already searched through her purse and confiscated all credit cards and remaining cash. He would need the money to disappear after everything was over. At 1 in the morning, he said, We're going now. Now? In the middle of the night? The airport is quieter at night, fewer people asking questions. They went out to his car. Claudia carried her suitcase. Darnell walked close behind her. To any observer, it would have looked like a couple going on vacation. But Darnell didn't drive to the airport. He drove toward the Swabian Alps, to a secluded forest area he had already scouted days earlier. When Claudia realized they weren't heading toward the airport, she understood what was going to happen. You want to kill me, she said with strange calm. Darnell didn't answer. He concentrated on the road. Why? She asked. You already had my money. You ruined everything, he finally said. With your questions, your doubts, your phone calls, you couldn't just be a good wife. A good wife? Claudia laughed bitterly. You mean a victim? I mean obedient. They drove on in silence. Claudia thought about her life, about the patients she would no longer care for, about the friends she had lost, about the love she had sought and never found. Strangely, she felt no hatred toward Darnell, only a deep sadness about the waste of everything. My colleagues will miss me, she said quietly, for a few weeks maybe. Then they'll forget you. Dr. Weber will ask questions. Dr. Weber can ask whatever he wants. He'll never be able to prove what happened. The forest was dark and still. Darnell drove down a narrow forest road until they were completely surrounded by trees. Here, no one would hear them. Get out, he ordered. Claudia's legs were trembling, but she obeyed. She thought about running, but where to? He was bigger, stronger, and she didn't know the forest. Go to that tree there, Darnell said, pointing to an old oak. Claudia walked slowly, drawing out each step. Her mind desperately searched for an escape, but there was none. Kneel, he commanded. She knelt down and felt the cold, damp earth through her pants. Above her, the leaves rustled in the wind, a peaceful sound that didn't match what was about to happen. Do you have any last words? Darnell asked with mock formality. Claudia turned to him. I don't forgive you, she said calmly. But I don't hate you either. You're just a sick, sad man. The words hit him harder than any scream or plea for mercy would have. For a moment he hesitated. Then he pulled the rope from his jacket pocket. Detective Inspector Heike Brandt found Claudia's body 3 days later. A jogger had noticed the abandoned car at the forest edge and called the police. The forensics team didn't take long to reconstruct the story. Darnell's fingerprints were everywhere, and he hadn't tried to cover his tracks. The manhunt for Darnell Carter lasted 2 weeks. He had fled to Berlin with Claudia's money, where he had already built a new identity and made contact with his next potential victim, a lonely widow he had met in an internet forum for the grieving. When police arrested him, he showed no remorse. On the contrary, he claimed Claudia was to blame for her own death. "She was hysterical," he said during questioning. "She wanted to destroy our marriage. I was just trying to calm her down." The forensic evidence painted a different picture. Claudia had fought for a long time. Her fingernails were full of skin fragments from her attacker. She hadn't died willingly. The trial lasted 8 months. Miriam Schultz, who never recovered from her guilt over abandoning her best friend, testified as a witness. She told the court about Claudia's transformation, about her own ignored warnings, about the last conversation that had ended in an argument. "I abandoned her," she cried on the witness stand. "I knew something was wrong, but I was hurt and proud. If I had helped her." Dr. Weber reported on his concerns about Claudia's last phone call, about the warning signs they had all overlooked. The entire clinic was traumatized. How had a man like Darnell Carter been able to manipulate one of their own so easily? Pastor Lehman spoke about the wedding, about his doubts, about Claudia's nervousness at the altar. "I should have asked more questions," he said. "But one doesn't want to interfere in happy marriages." Darnell Carter was sentenced to life imprisonment. During the sentencing, he still showed no emotion. To him, Claudia had never been a human being, just a means to an end. The investigation revealed the true extent of his crimes. Darnell Carter was actually named Michael Washington and was a serial offender. Over 15 years, he had defrauded at least 7 women. 2 others had disappeared without trace before Claudia. His methods had always been the same: approach lonely, financially stable, middle-aged women, make them emotionally dependent, isolate them, then rob them. Claudia was the first he had killed. The others he had only robbed and then left. But Claudia had started asking questions, had resisted. He couldn't tolerate that. A year after the trial, Miriam Schultz founded a foundation in Claudia's name. The Claudia Reimann Foundation helps women who have become victims of domestic violence. Miriam works there as a volunteer and tries to compensate for her guilt through helping others. Claudia fought to the end, she often says to the women seeking help. She didn't give up, even when everything seemed hopeless. We must not abandon them, as I did. The rehabilitation clinic established a memorial garden for Claudia. Her colleagues plant new flowers there every year and remember the woman they had called the soul of the ward. Dr. Weber has changed his approach to patients and colleagues. He now asks more questions, pays closer attention to warning signs, intervenes earlier. "Claudia's death taught us that looking away is not an option," he says. Claudia Reimann lived only 38 years. She wanted to be loved and instead found a murderer. She sought security and fell into deadly danger. Her story is a warning about the Darnell Carters of this world, about men who fake love in order to kill. But it's also a reminder that no one is perfect, that even intelligent, educated people can become victims, and that the blame always lies with the perpetrator, never with the victim. In Claudia's estate, they found a diary. The last entry, written the day before her murder, read, "I've made a terrible mistake, but I'm not giving up. Somehow I'll find a way to get out of this hell. For all the other women out there going through this, don't give up. There's always a way." It was her last attempt to encourage others. 3 hours later, she was dead. Claudia Reimann rests in Stuttgart's Waldfriedhof Cemetery. On her gravestone it says, "She healed others and sought healing herself, in love and memory." Every day people come to her grave, colleagues, patients, strangers who have heard her story. They lay flowers and promise to be more vigilant, to act more courageously, to help sooner. Claudia's death wasn't in vain if it saves even one woman's life. If it makes even one person look more carefully, ask more questions, act sooner. Because in the end, we are all responsible for each other. And sometimes the love we seek isn't the romantic love of a partner, but the love of a community that doesn't look away when someone is in danger. That would have been Claudia's true legacy.